Hello, good evening. My name is Alexander Wurzer. We are back on the SAPI IP Business Talks. We are now in Europe today, so it's again in the evening. Today it's 6 o'clock, and I'm very happy that we have Ms Javadi with us. We have we will have a discussion on international trade and IP. This is a very, very complex issue, and you are invited as our guests. You are invited to talk with us in terms of, please write your comments, ask questions on the chat. I will pick that up and integrate that in my discussion with Sanas. So, and first of all, I invite you guests to work with us, and I'm absolutely happy to have Ms Javadi today with me. And the first thing is that you should introduce you and your way into IP. So where you come from, what you're doing, and how get you involved with intellectual property rights in the world of intangibles?
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex, for the invitation and for the short introduction. My name is Ms Javadi. I'm originally Iranian. I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland, and it's been more than 17 years I've been dealing with different legal issues, especially intellectual property. Originally coming from Iran, a developing country, of course, IP is still a very new field, still under development. So it was one of the very new and newly discovered majors in Iran, and I always wanted to try something new so that I can add value and contribute to the improvement of the legal system. So this is why I decided to shift from international law to intellectual property. So I passed a university exam, then I started to work in the area for the first time in Ministry of Oil, the very first IP department in the government sector. And then through working in the IP department of Research Institute of Petroleum Industry, I got to know WIPO function, WIPO courses, and I started to pass online courses, distant learning courses, and then WIPO summer school. And coming to Geneva and getting more and more in touch with IPS experts from WIPO side, from EU side, Swiss side, I decided to move to Switzerland to continue my studies in this area. And I started to work with Swiss IP Institute as my first work opportunity in Switzerland, then different UN agencies, WIPO, International Trade Center, EU IPO. And yeah, so I still have this passion about being more and more involved in and contribution to intellectual property system, especially in developing and least developed countries. So I do policy work, legal advice, and training and lectures for developing and least developed countries, majorly in Middle East and Asia. And I'm trying to have like a new step to African context as well. So this is just very brief introduction. Otherwise, I can go on about my background.
Yeah, wonderful, very interesting. So you come pretty much from the policy perspective on it, right?
Yeah, I started from policy perspective, then I started to I shifted to private sector, then I came back to policy area as well. And I think that working with Swiss IP Institute, WIPO, and EU IPO gave me a lot of insight about how policy works in IP domain.
Okay. Can you give me an example? What is which kind of policy is there relevant? Is it so I can imagine pharmaceuticals and the question of licenses or friend or in which kind of discussions you were involved?
Basically, on behalf of Swiss IP Institute, it was really interesting for me to be engaged in international negotiations in WIPO and WTO TRIPS Council on diverse aspects of patent law, especially in pharmaceutical sector, transfer of technology, and also on the branding side, trademark and geographical indications. So it really gave me a lot of insight on the free trade agreements and regional agreements, as well as some sort of debates and discussions between developed world and developing world on diverse IP aspects, from patent law into trademark law, GI issues. And so we really had to work on different. It was a short like cooperation, but I had to work on the switch position papers, for example, for the access of developing countries to green technologies, for the patent issues in pharmaceutical sector to be raised in WTO TRIPS Council. And then when I started to work with WIPO, we also had these technical assistance projects for helping the developing and least developed countries in ASEAN context in Southeast Asia. So we were helping and advising the local governments and private sector how to improve their intellectual property system, either from technology side and also from branding side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got you. So when it comes to international trade, we have so many IP issues. I mean, on the one hand, IP is dedicated, is a mean which should support trade and the industry. And on the other hand, we see again and again that it's quite difficult to deal with that. And you can say the smaller the companies, the more difficult is that, because they, for a certain lack of resources, of experience. So what is your experience with, let's say, brand names or trademarks when it comes to international trade? Is that, I mean, for to a certain extent, you develop your brand to be recognized, that the origin of the service or the product is clear. Do you think, let's say, when we have a completely different language from the Latin languages, like let's say China, what would you say? Are there typical issues which have to be dealt with there?
Talking about trademarks, there are a lot of issues to cover, but as you mentioned, one of the because going to the multinational perspective, most of international and multinational companies, in most cases, they have very well established IP strategies in place in order to manage their IP assets, including trademarks. But again, going back to the new businesses or startups, or going to entrepreneurs with whom I'm working a lot, especially women entrepreneurs, unfortunately, we have this either lack of the IP awareness or partial awareness. For example, in most of developing countries or the least developed countries, like even Iran, either Iran, Turkey, or the countries in Southeast Asia, unfortunately, in most cases, intellectual property system is registration oriented. So businesses forget about the prior steps before registration phase, which goes under the IP assets management, because of this lack of awareness, because the governments majorly play a special roles in making the awareness of importance of intellectual property system, especially brands and under brands trademark system, and the role that trademarks can play in the business development as the backbone and identity of the businesses. So unfortunately, the problem is that, this lack of awareness or partial awareness amounts to the fact that businesses go for the registration. And first of all, there is this lack of understanding that, IP issues are territorial, trademark is territorial. If they seek the registration in local phase, this doesn't mean that they have the protection in international markets or in regional markets. And of course, they cannot even prevent the infringement issues as well. So this is one issue. The other issue is that, lack of funding. They don't have enough access to the funding. And in some countries, the governments provide loans or financial assistance to help new businesses to cover some of the IP registration costs. But unfortunately, businesses are not sure enough, or they're not capable enough to use these financial resources. And again, beside that, before registration phase, because in most cases they are so much in rush to enter to the new market, they don't do initial steps before registration, which is trademark search. And trademark search can cover many things. It could cover the previously registered trademarks for the same classes of goods and services, for example, similar or identical marks, as well as the local meaning and local, how can I say it, local adaptation of the trademark name according to local laws and public policies of the country in hand. For example, we had this case in Iran before, that one of the, I think it was a German, if I'm not mistaken, a German brand that wanted to enter Iran in food sector, and this brand is a very well-known brand in food industry, but in Iran it had a very offensive meaning. So like, you know, like if the businesses are not familiar with this context of the search, they would go directly for the trademark offices, and they would incur a lot of cost and energy and time to register their marks. And in some jurisdictions, you also should seek for the advice or assistance of the local attorneys and lawyers. So this would incur a lot of cost for you. But with not a simple search, but with
to a certain extent, Anas, that leads, I would say, so in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, when we see new multinational companies come up, then they have this total artificial names. Yeah, I mean, like Google, or even worse. Yeah. And one reason is that these multinational companies need a combination of letters, which means nothing in no language, yeah, so that you cannot have this bad connotation in a certain country. Yeah, so it means nothing, but good God, it doesn't mean anything bad in certain countries.
Yeah, true. And you know, like another issue is that unfortunately, and I witness this, I don't say that on daily basis, but on weekly basis, that unfortunately, IP system and under IP trademark is not considered as a combination of legal, business, and marketing perspective. So it's, in most cases, it's separated. The lawyers seek trademark registration without considering the business aspects, because trademark plays a major role in marketing and advertising for your products and services, so that you can have you can create the loyalty and the customer bond. So unfortunately, because lawyers in most cases, they, even me, like, okay, I'm trying to learn during all these projects, but we have our own legal perspective. We don't know business perspective or market perspective. So before entering the market, it's really important to combine all legal and business or commercial resources, or
this is an it is an interdisciplinary issue, but it is also a timing, a development issue. So you start as a small brand, as a small company with a local market, for local people, yeah, very domestic, and you create your brand, you protect it with trademark, and then you grow. Yeah, and you always trust in your brand, because this is it's your DNA, it's your legacy. Yeah, and then you start to become international, and typically international means not global. It is just you come from whatever, you come from France to Germany, or from Italy to Great Britain. So this is still Europe. And then you grow even more, and then you start to make a real intercontinental business, but you have still your brand. And then it becomes really tricky to change something when you realize that whatever in Portuguese, or let's say in Vietnamese, to be really far away. In Vietnamese or in Chinese or in Japanese, what your name means something completely different, or even worse, the sound is completely strange and means something bad there.
Yeah, true. So as I mentioned, Alex, it is really important to use the databases. In many countries, we have the trademark registration, like the previous registration or databases in place, using WIPO, Madrid Monitor or brand database, as well as EU IPO and some other IP offices trademark registration database, so that we can, okay, it's not 100% a guarantee that if you do this search, you would be assured that your trademark would be registered in the later stage in the targeted market. But this can give you a better possibility to protect your mark without before incurring a lot of expenses. And beside that, beside using the trademarks, this is what I always advise my clients, and in most cases they don't like to listen because they don't want to pay money. That I always encourage them, especially in Iran, that okay, try to seek advice beforehand so that you can make sure what's the trademark requirements according to the local law of your targeted market. We had recently this case of one of the very prestigious producers in Iran, in saffron sector. They were seeking trademark registration in Asia. Even if we did a lot of search, and it wasn't only my search or their search, it was like few firms, IP firms search of databases. But unfortunately, in the end, it was rejected in China. Why? Because there is no guarantee, like, okay, we do this search, but Chinese trademark office came with this, argument or with this justification that according to these reasons, this trademark is not registerable under Chinese law. So this is really important to seek the advice of the local lawyers and also using the databases before starting the registration phase. And another issue, I can go on and on for ages to say what are the flaws in trademark registration. And unfortunately, even after registration phase, businesses don't pay enough attention to monitoring and managing their trademarks. Again, another they had, one of the very big food producers in Iran, they had their brand registered in another country out of Iran, and they had branches of these restaurants. But trademark, according to most local laws, is valid for 10 years. They didn't know that before because they thought that, okay, once they register, it's permanently protectable. And they forgot, and they didn't know that they have to seek renewal of the trademark. So now they are in the process of, negotiating with the IP office if they can pay some fines and register again. And, they're seeking the local lawyers' advice how to deal with the renewal phase. So there are so many issues with trademark registration.
Yeah, and even they have to show typically that they use it, and they need a certain documentation that it is in use, and and ask them. So 5 years ago, give me a documentation how you used over the last 5 years your trademark in your brand or in your marketing.
Yeah, true. Exactly.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So this is why I always emphasize, like, I had a meeting with one of the energy companies in Iran, and I was like saying that, okay, do you have even IP education for your personals? Are they aware of using IP system in an efficient manner? They said no. So what I mean is, like, even in an internal level, sometimes, especially, it doesn't matter what the size of the business is, either from a startup perspective or a multinational company, it's really important to have this IP education. I remember the time that I was working for Ericsson, Swedish telecommunication company. They always had this, okay, they had a IP corporate strategy in place, and they were always communicating into personal, like what is required to do as a like employee, the confidentiality issues, the brand usage, and patent issues, transfer of technology, licensing, and the other stuff, which are not considered in most businesses because there's no IP strategy in place. So they're only devoted to registration. And I think that once their trademark or patent or industrial design is registered, they're safe, which is not true.
Yeah, I guess this is an understanding. Like I have now the contract, or I have a licensing deal, but they forget that the licensing deal goes on and is a project, and it's not a snapshot. And I mean, one thing which is really interesting is I worked with Thermomix, with Vorwerk, and so first they call the product in different regions different. So in Southern Europe and Australia, they call the Thermomix Bimbi, and so that's one interesting decision to have different brandings in different countries, even when it is also a Latin country with a Latin language. And another thing was that with the introduction of the digital service system there, we tried to find out what will that cost, having a more or less global reach for the trademark protection. And the lawyer said, we cannot say that, we cannot say that. And it was really hard simply to budget that, because it is so unforeseeable how the officers will react and what will be accepted and what not. I mean, this is not good for the system. This is not good for convincing decision makers to invest in that game, because this unforeseeable or unforeseeability is not really something which managers like, and that you can't say what this, let's say, trademark protection in this case, what will that cost? I mean, that's de facto a problem. To explain that to business, to decision makers, that everybody can do whatever they want in terms of, in this country you will get it, and in this country maybe not, and that's. I mean, that doesn't make it easier, let's say.
Yeah, true.
Oh, Martin Wilming has a nice example. The Audi, the car manufacturer in Germany, they have an electric vehicle which is called e-tron, and there is a French translation, letron, and that means a bunch of shit. So it's So even big car manufacturers fail.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. Yeah, this is why I really like, Alex, this term of, I think it's no training that I have, and I don't mention to this, like awareness raising education. We should build the IP culture either in public or private sector, and also IP strategy. What is registration? IP system is not only registration, and we have this issue with patents as well, with so many other issues. And I think it can improve, but it takes time, because as I mentioned, unfortunately, businesses have this fear of putting their resources, money, and time, and it doesn't work eventually. So what I really like in Switzerland is that Swiss IP Institute is doing a lot of awareness raising and education on protecting intellectual property, even for the children in primary school. When it goes to the counterfeiting goods and piracy issues, they train the children from the very young ages, so that they respect intellectual property rights. And this way we can build the culture. But like building the culture when you want to advise a businessman in his 40s or 50s or 60s, And especially like in developing or least developed context, it's really difficult and it takes ages.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, a basic IP knowledge should be a part of a standard education. In terms of you should have a basic understanding of economy, and even to the question how companies work. So some very basic understanding of the legal framework and here of the intellectual property rights would help, as you said, understanding the source of creativity, and that has some value. And I mean, especially in that digital era and these ubiquitous usage of the thoughts of third parties. I mean, it's good to share things. It is wonderful that we can inform us in the way how it is possible today. But in addition, we should also highlight that when we use third-party intellectual property, or we see that, for example, in games, when gaming programmers use characters from books or from movies or real world products, and they simply don't care, and sometimes they even don't understand or don't know that this is that they infringe here something, that there is a right on that, and that you have to ask at least. There is no basic understanding of that, even in very developed countries.
Yeah, true. No, even like in Switzerland, I was advising a company, and they were like, they had so many, they had established so many startups in Geneva Innovation Hub, and we had this discussion of the different IP assets that the company would own, but the managing director was always insisting on patents, and I was trying to somehow convince him, okay, there are some other IP issues that you can have the possibility of protection, like your softwares, the industrial design that you have. And as I mentioned, going back to the trademark phase, they had this, unfortunately, misunderstanding about protection of their rights. So they filed they filed all their applications on their own, either trademark or patents. And sometimes I see that, like going back to the patent discussion, like they wouldn't do a patent attorney or a patent expert to draft the patent claims and patent applications without consideration of translation issues and all these issues that they might have in different countries, from China to South Korea to Japan to Russia. And they hired me so that I do some sort of IP portfolio management to help them to overcome these problems. But it was so late, because they engaged me 3 years after they started seeking the protection. And in the end, they were like, okay, you don't have
classic example. Yeah, you see the problem on that level, but the real issue is on that level.
Yeah, and even in Switzerland, with all this, with this developed IP infrastructure, but you still see that the companies have this misunderstanding on how they can efficiently use intellectual property system. And because they don't want to incur costs, they do it on their own, and they fail in the middle of the way. So yeah, this is really a huge issue. But I think with all this awareness raising and training that are going on, and especially now within pandemic time, the virtual trainings that we have, I think the future would be more promising than the past.
Yeah, no, I mean, to a certain extent, we have many discussions on copyrights, on patents, on brands, and this is good. It's good that simply because we have the discussion, more and more people get at least involved in the basic thoughts about that. I mean, of course, everybody who is in the IP business have the examples from people out there which have no clue about that. What I think from time to time is, especially when it comes to journalists, when you read in newspapers or journals, you can more or less 100% be sure that when it comes to intellectual property rights, what is written there is simply wrong. I mean, it's not anyhow not just confusing or just a little bit not correct. No, it is simply wrong. And I mean, for example, for a journalist who is talking about the economy of a country, it is a kind of style that they say, I don't understand anything about IP. Yeah, it's a little bit like what C.P. Snow said in his Reed lectures about the two cultures. Yeah, we have the natural law guys which use mathematics as a basic tool, and they say I understand mathematics and it's important, and I understand natural laws. And there is the opposite, the culture of the novels and book reading, and this cultural guy says I don't understand anything about natural laws, science, mathematics. I don't care. So to a certain extent, you can be a respected cultural person which don't understand anything about natural science or mathematics, and that's fascinating. And a little bit is I think it can't be that a journalist who is writing about management, economy, the trends, international trade, don't understand even the simplest basis and general concepts of IP.
Yeah, true. I had a client, because like in Iran, we are really patent oriented. Like everyone is into patents, USPTO patents, USPTO patents. And I always emphasize that, okay, before registration of your patent, please assess the market, if you have potential investors, if you have the commercialization possibility. And I had a client a few years ago, and he was insisting that he wanna register his product under patent system, which under Iranian local laws was not registerable. We even had this discussion with the head of patent office in Iran, and he was like, Sanas, this is not a patent. Why he's insisting? And it was protectable under industrial design. But because we've talked a lot about patent, trademark, the businesses are not aware of the other IP aspects. So it was like, okay, you can protect this because you can protect the visual aspects of your product, not the technical aspects, because you don't have any inventive step for your product protection. He was insisting, and in the end, he dropped the case. He said, no, I only want patent, not industrial design. So, yeah.
No, I like that pretty much what you say, because in the classroom for my master class, I have this, I would say, trivial slide where I show a smartphone, okay, and then all the applicable IP rights on a smartphone, okay, and of course you have patents, but you have every kind of IP right is applicable on the different aspects of such a complex product. And what I'm explaining then is, look, it sounds so simple that we should make IP management here, okay? So that we take a product and then we analyze which aspect of the product should be protected, how, to create a certain exclusivity in the market. I mean, it seems, I don't know, it's IP management from the first hour or so, yeah? Very trivial. But when you go into companies, when you really look in the practice, so then what do you have? You have patent attorneys, you have copyright experts, you have trademark experts. Sometimes they include design rights, sometimes not. So when you just want to do that you have a complex product and you just ask the question, which aspects of a product should I protect in which way to create a certain exclusivity for my brand or for my product in the market? Who can answer that? Yeah. So the patent attorney will explain you what patents are doing, and will go for the patent aspects, and the others will go to their aspects. So even for that kind of question, which seems for a business perspective very simple, that can be an extremely complex answer. And I mean that kind of complexity and the separation of this of the expertise of the experts which we have. And I was in a business meeting where we talked about a software-based solution, and then the patent attorney said, "Oh, whoa, no! So when we come to this point, I'm not anymore responsible. This is a copyright issue." Hey, on the other side of the table, we have top management, business decision makers. All what they want to know is, will that more or less work or not? But at the end, they don't care that you are not in the latest details of copyright. Yeah, we can clarify that later, but not in front of the business makers. And I think that is an issue that also from a training perspective, that something like IP guys typically don't exist. What we have are experts in very distinctive areas.
Yeah, true. What I remember the first time, Alex, that I had to give presentation in Asan region on behalf of WIPO, I prepared my slides and I sent it to my director. And he responded, "You cannot present this. This is pure legal context. Businesses don't like to hear that. And you are going to the countries that they even have language barrier. So you have to be as precise, as straight to the point, and as simple as it is with business perspective. Don't bring all these legal arguments in your slides." So since then, I learned, okay, how we have to, of course, addressing the legal aspects is important, how you can protect your trademark, patent, and the other IP issues. But what is really important is providing the tangible solutions for businesses through IP systems so that they know the value. Otherwise, they wouldn't put their money and their resources to this. And so this is a very I think common issue that businesses have, and the role that IP experts or IP advisors can play in this area is really important. And I think all these training sessions are helping, because each training session I give, then afterwards businesses refer, okay, how we can protect this, how we can protect that. And not even in the registration phase, in the contract phase, in enforcement phase, there are so many issues that are not still covered, so many contract types that businesses even don't know how to use it, like NDAs, franchise, licensing, relevant terms and conditions. And in enforcement phase, most of businesses think that, okay, as soon as they have infringement in place, they have to refer to the local courts, and they are not aware of some other instruments, some other mechanisms like ADR solutions, alternative dispute resolution mechanism, which is in place. So so from pre-protection phase up to the enforcement phase, there is a huge work to be done.
Yeah, I mean, Nicole Patterson wrote here in the chat a comment that it is so easy to lose brand equity, especially in international trade, that this should really something, I would say, on business schools or on management trainings. And this is fascinating because I've worked so I tried to work with business schools. Some of the big business schools in Europe, in the States, and they said, so this is nothing what MBAs have to learn. Okay, so the top business schools around the globe told me that IP is not an issue for an MBA. Yeah, I mean, even not from a very helicopter view, very high level, but a basic understanding what's going on here. And we know, of course, that whatever 70-80% of the value of the companies, and it's not just true for SMEs, it's everywhere, that it comes from intangibles, and intangibles are a totally different risk structure. As Nicole says, it is so easy to lose your brand equity in international trade, and this is not a normal distribution, a Gauss curve. This is a log normal curve. So you have an 80% chance to lose your value, and that's really an issue.
Yeah, true. True. I mean, I'm really, I don't know, like you asked me why I started IP. I think under the current world infrastructure and reality, especially in pandemic, post-pandemic time, IP will play more and more role, like from education perspective, from policy perspective, and from business perspective. Even you cannot imagine, Alex, like last night I was checking like how many job positions are opened in IP area, not as an IP advisor for businesses in different government sectors, NGOs, international organizations. So the more we go ahead, the more we get to know the real value of intellectual property. I don't want to go far from our points of tonight, because I think we still have 3 other questions to address. But one point is, even like, because one part of my work, because we have Nicole here and we've been working together a lot on women empowerment, even under women empowerment, and this was exactly the study that I did for EU IPO, even for under the IP system, we have women there. The role they play, not even in innovation and patent side and in STEAM side, science and mathematics, also in branding side, how we can protect entrepreneurship under intellectual property system. And now there is a huge discussion in ASEAN level and also in African level, and we also have it in the Latin American context, that the more we go ahead, the more we need to protect local producers, especially women, and protect their IP rights so that they can enter local, regional, and international market in a more efficient way, so that they don't, because like one of the problems that we have is also counterfeiting goods. When we had these interview sessions with local producers in Bangladesh, they were proud of producing counterfeiting goods because they didn't have any information, and they thought, okay, they have this village out of Dhaka that they're producing fake products, and they didn't know how counterfeiting goods could be problematic for the health and safety of the customers. So this is again because of the lack of awareness. But if they know that with producing the original products and protecting their products under their own name and their own brand, they can enter the international market, especially European and American, in American context, in a more efficient way. And they can also sell their products with higher prices. Rather than selling for €1 or $1, they can sell it for $6, $7. So there are so many case studies about this, how intellectual property system help businesses to efficiently enter the international market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to a certain extent, that's a cornerstone of the internationalization, that you have your brand in place and that you're able to show others that you are well established. Maybe not in that country, but you are well established, and that your product has a source. It comes from a very respectable company and with experience. So Sanas, unfortunately, the time is over for us today. And I like the way how you hitchhiked the interview. So that means I promise to the audience and to you, we will come back with an interview about female empowerment and IP. And I like the topic very much, and I think that is a story which should be told. But then we need another evening and another 45 minutes. So, Sanas, thank you very much. I enjoyed that very much, and I see from the chat that you have many fans. That's absolutely for good reason. And to all of you, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your activity, and looking forward to meet you on LinkedIn now in the after show party. Sanas and I, we will be available there, and we can discuss that in detail on LinkedIn in the chat. So thank you very much, Sanas. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, Alex, for your time. Bye bye. Have a nice evening.